The first thing I remember after hanging up with 911 was the sound of my own breathing. It was too loud, too steady, too calm for a woman who had just watched her sister get thrown against a bathroom door. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator, the phone still warm in my hand, and I listened to my mother's footsteps pace from the front door to the living room and back again. Tell them it was an accident, she said. Not to me. To my father. They were in the hallway, just out of sight, but the walls in this house are thin. They always have been. Tell them she was drinking, she fell, she hit her head on the tub. Anything. Marjorie, the police are already on their way. Then call them back. Call them and say it was a misunderstanding. Say we overreacted. Say what? My father's voice cracked on the second word. I had never heard that before. In 27 years, my father had never cracked. He was the one who fixed the garbage disposal and balanced the checkbook and told me to stop crying over the calculus test because life didn't hand out extra points for tears. But now he cracked, and it sounded like a branch giving way under too much snow. Say that my niece's husband got carried away. Say he was drunk. Say he's not her husband. He's not even her boyfriend. He's your sister's son, Marjorie, and he broke into our house and put his hands on our daughter. The refrigerator hummed behind my back. I could feel the vibration through my spine, a low steady thrum that matched the pulse in my temples. I had been recording for 47 minutes. I knew this because I had watched the timer tick up from 0 as I stood in the pantry with the door cracked open, my phone pressed against the sliver of light between the hinges. I had watched my sister's face go from confused to terrified to something else entirely. Something I did not want to name. He had come through the back door at 7:14. I knew the time because I had checked my watch when the lock clicked. My father had been in the garage, my mother had been on the phone with the insurance company, and my sister had been making herself a sandwich at the counter. I was in the pantry looking for a jar of olives. I saw him cross the kitchen in 3 long strides. I saw his hand close around her ponytail. I saw the sandwich fall to the floor, bread side down, and I thought, that's going to stain the grout. And then I pulled out my phone. I had been a lawyer for 4 years. I had spent 4 years learning that evidence is useless if it's not admissible. That witnesses are useless if they're not credible. That the truth is useless if no one believes you. So I stood in the pantry and I recorded. I recorded every word he said. I recorded the sound of his palm against her cheek. I recorded the thump of her head against the cabinet, the crash of the kettle falling off the stove, the high thin wail that came out of her throat when he dragged her toward the bathroom. And then I stepped out. It took me 4 seconds to cross the kitchen. It took me another 2 to grab the cast iron skillet off the stove. It took me 1 second to bring it down on the back of his skull. He dropped like a sack of potatoes. My sister slid down the wall and folded into herself. I set the skillet on the counter, picked up my phone from where I had left it on the floor, and dialed 911. The operator asked me what my emergency was. I said my sister had been assaulted. I said the perpetrator was unconscious, but still breathing. I gave the address. I spelled my last name. I hung up. That was 12 minutes ago. Now my mother was pacing the hallway. My father was rattling the car keys in his pocket, and somewhere in the bathroom, my sister was running the shower so no one could hear her cry. I could still hear her, though. I had spent 4 years learning to listen for what people tried to hide. My mother came into the kitchen. She looked down at me on the floor and something flickered across her face. I used to think I knew what that flicker meant. Concern. Worry. The kind of love that made her bring soup when I had the flu and call me every Tuesday night to ask if I had eaten. But now I saw it differently. I saw the flicker of a woman calculating odds. You need to get up, she said. They're going to ask you what happened. I know what they're going to ask. Your sister is in no state to talk. Your father is upset. She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. I'm going to tell them you were driving. That you came home, you saw him, you hit him. Self-defense. Justifiable. Whatever word they use. I looked up at her. She was wearing the cardigan I had bought her for Christmas. It was pale blue, the color of a winter sky, and it had a button missing from the 3rd hole. I had offered to sew it back on. She had told me not to bother. He wasn't a stranger, I said. He's family. Which is exactly why we need to handle this quietly. Quietly. Your Aunt Helen is going to be devastated. Her only son in jail. Arrested. Charged. Do you understand what that will do to her? I thought about my sister. I thought about the way her voice had gone high and thin, like a wire being pulled too tight. I thought about the thump of her skull against the cabinet. I thought about how she had looked at me when I stepped out of the pantry, how her eyes had gone wide with something that was not relief. It was confusion. Because she had not known I was there. She had not known I was watching. She had thought she was alone in the kitchen with him, and she had been alone, because I had been in the pantry recording. I'm not lying for him, I said. My mother knelt down in front of me. She put her hands on my shoulders the way she used to do when I was a child and had scraped my knee or lost a spelling bee or cried over a boy who didn't call. It was the same grip, the same pressure, the same look in her eyes. But the words were different. Listen to me carefully, she said. That boy is going to tell them it was consensual. That your sister wanted it. That she changed her mind after the fact. He's going to say she was drunk. He's going to say she invited him over. He's going to say whatever he wants. But I have the recording. Her fingers tightened. I could feel her nails through the fabric of my shirt. You don't understand what you're doing. I'm an attorney, Mom. I understand exactly what I'm doing. You're putting him in prison. He put himself in prison. I just happened to be there with a phone. She let go of me and stood up. For a moment she just stood there, looking down at me with that flicker again. Calculating. Weighing. Deciding which of her daughters was worth saving. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to say, which one is it? But I already knew the answer. I had always known. The bathroom door opened. My sister stepped out wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping, her cheek already swollen into a purple welt. She looked at me on the floor. She looked at my mother standing over me. She said nothing. She walked past both of us and went to her room and closed the door. My father came into the kitchen. He set the car keys on the counter. He looked at my mother, then at me, and the crack in his voice was gone. In its place was something harder. The police are here, he said. They want to talk to all of us. My mother reached for the car keys. My father put his hand over hers. They looked at each other, and in that look I saw 30 years of marriage, 30 years of decisions made behind closed doors, 30 years of choosing each other over everything else. I was not part of that look. I had never been part of it. I stood up. I brushed off my jeans. I tucked my phone into my back pocket, where the screen was still lit, where the recording was still paused, where 47 minutes of evidence waited to decide everyone's future. The police knocked on the front door. My mother flinched. My father squeezed her hand. I walked past both of them and opened the door, and the cold night air hit my face like a slap. The officer looked at me. He had kind eyes. I had learned not to trust kind eyes. Ma'am, he said, we received a call about an assault at this address. Yes, officer. I made that call. He glanced past me into the house. He saw my mother standing in the kitchen doorway, her hand still pressed against her chest. He saw my father with his head bowed. He saw the cast iron skillet on the counter. Can you tell me what happened here? I opened my mouth. I could feel my mother's eyes on the back of my neck, burning, begging, bargaining. I could feel the weight of the phone in my pocket, the weight of 47 minutes, the weight of everything I had recorded and everything I had not recorded. The truth and the silence. The evidence and the absence. Sir, I said, I want to start by saying that I have a recording. Every word. Every sound. I have it all. The officer's eyes changed. Not kind anymore. Attentive. Please, he said, let's go inside and sit down. I stepped aside. I let him in. I let my mother's gaze bore into my back as I led the officer to the kitchen table. And I did not look at her. I did not look at my father. I looked only at the officer, and I pulled out my phone, and I pressed play. The officer's name was Reynolds. He had a mustache that needed trimming and a notepad that looked like it had been through a rainstorm. He sat at my mother's kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinner every year for as long as I could remember, and he listened to the first 3 minutes of the recording with his pen frozen in midair. Then he stopped it. Ma'am, he said, looking at me, is this your sister's voice? Yes. And the male voice, that's the perpetrator, that's David Canfield. My cousin. My mother made a sound from the doorway. It was not a word. It was something between a gasp and a groan, the kind of noise you make when the doctor tells you the test came back positive. My father pulled out a chair and sat down hard enough that the leg scraped against the linoleum. Officer Reynolds wrote something on his pad. His handwriting was small and tight, the kind of writing that came from years of filling out forms in patrol cars. "I'm going to need to hear the rest of this," he said. "And I'm going to need to talk to your sister. She's in her room. She's shaken up. She's going to need a minute." "I understand that. But we have a man in custody at the county hospital who's claiming he was invited into this house. Claiming the whole thing was consensual. Claiming he never laid a hand on anyone until you came at him with a pan." The kitchen went quiet. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I could hear the clock on the microwave tick. I could hear my mother's breathing shift from controlled to shallow, like someone trying not to hyperventilate. I pressed play again. The recording picked up at the 4-minute mark. My sister's voice, high and trembling, saying, "Please stop." David's voice, low and casual, saying, "Just relax." The sound of a chair being pushed back. The sound of my sister's bare feet on the tile, running, and then the thud of her body hitting the cabinet. I watched Officer Reynolds' face. He was good at keeping it neutral. That was part of the job, I knew. You listen to terrible things every day, and you learn to keep your face from betraying what you felt. But his jaw tightened. His pen moved faster. At the 12-minute mark, my sister screamed. It was a short sound, cut off quickly, like someone had put a hand over her mouth. I remembered that part. I remembered standing in the pantry with my phone held steady, counting the seconds, waiting for the moment when the recording would be enough. I had counted to 17 before she screamed again. Officer Reynolds stopped the playback again. "She didn't call for help," he said. "It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. She couldn't." He had his hand around her throat. I paused. I was in the pantry. I was recording. His eyes met mine. "You didn't intervene." "I intervened at 17 minutes. That's when I came out with the skillet." 17 minutes, he repeated. "I needed to document everything. You know how these cases go." He said, she said. "No witnesses. No proof." I needed proof. My mother stepped into the kitchen. She was moving differently now, slower, more deliberate, like someone walking through a minefield. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from Officer Reynolds. Her hands were folded on the table in front of her, perfectly still. "Officer," she said, and her voice was soft and reasonable, the voice she used when she was trying to talk the bank into waiving a fee. "My daughter is a very good lawyer. She's passionate about evidence. She's passionate about documentation. She's been trained to think that way. But I think what she's not telling you is that this man, David, he has a history. Mental health issues. Impulse control problems. He's been in treatment. He's been on medication. My sister Helen, his mother, she's been fighting for him his whole life. And my daughter knows that." Officer Reynolds looked at her. His pen was still on the pad. "Ma'am, are you suggesting your son is mentally ill?" "David is not my son. He's my nephew. And yes, I'm suggesting that he's not entirely responsible for his actions. I'm suggesting that what happened here tonight was a tragedy, but it was not a crime. Not in the way you're thinking." I stared at her. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed on Officer Reynolds, her hands still folded, her voice still soft. "I was in the house too," she continued. "I was in the living room. I didn't hear any screaming until after the kitchen fight. I didn't hear any of the things my daughter is claiming she recorded. And I think, officer, that you need to consider the possibility that the recording has been edited. That it was manipulated. That my daughter, in her passion for justice, might have taken some liberties." The refrigerator hummed. The microwave clock ticked. My father sat in his chair with his head bowed, staring at his own hands, saying nothing. "Mom," I said. My voice came out lower than I intended. "You didn't hear the screaming because you were on the phone with Aunt Helen. You were talking to her about David. You knew he was coming over. You knew he was in a bad state. You knew he was out of his mind on something. You told me to stay in the pantry because you didn't want him to see me. You told me to record everything if things got bad. You told me that." Her face didn't change. Not a flicker. Not a twitch. She just looked at Officer Reynolds and shook her head slowly, sadly, like a mother disappointed in her wayward child. She's very creative, she said. She always was. When she was 8, she told her teacher that the neighbor's dog had bitten her. She had a bruise and everything. It turned out she had fallen off her bike. The dog was inside the house the whole time. She just wanted attention. I remembered that. I remembered the dog inside the house. I remembered falling off my bike and crying and my mother telling me to stop being dramatic. I remembered the bruise on my thigh and the lie I had told my teacher because I wanted someone, anyone, to look at me with concern. But that was 19 years ago. That was a child trying to get noticed. That was not the woman sitting at the kitchen table with a recording of a crime and a mother who was trying to rewrite history. Officer Reynolds, I said, you can verify the recording. The metadata is intact. The timestamps line up. I have the original file on my phone and I have a backup in the cloud. There's no editing. There's no manipulation. What you hear is exactly what happened. He looked at the phone on the table. He looked at my mother. He looked at my father, who still had not raised his head. I'm going to need to take that phone, he said. As evidence. My mother's eyes flicked to me. For 1 second, the mask slipped. I saw the fear underneath. The fear of exposure, the fear of loss, the fear of everything she had built for 30 years coming apart because I had pressed record instead of opening the pantry door. You can have the phone, I said. But I want a chain of custody document. I want a signed receipt. I want a copy of everything on that device before I hand it over. Officer Reynolds almost smiled. You're a lawyer, huh? 4th year. I thought so. He pulled a plastic bag from his jacket and held it out. I'm going to put the phone in here. I'm going to seal it. You're going to initial the seal. And then we're all going to have a very long conversation about what happened in this kitchen tonight. I put my phone in the bag. I initialed the seal. I watched Officer Reynolds write my name on the chain of custody form, and I watched my mother's face settle into something new. Not fear anymore. Resignation. The resignation of a woman who had lost a battle she hadn't known she was fighting. My sister came out of her room. She was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said something about a summer camp I had attended when I was 12. Her face was still swollen. Her hair was still wet. She walked past me without looking at me and sat down next to my father. Officer Reynolds asked if she was ready to talk. She said yes. And then she started to speak. My sister spoke for 22 minutes. I counted because I had nothing else to do. Officer Reynolds's pen scratched across the notepad, and my mother's hands stayed folded on the table, and my father sat like a statue carved from the same granite as the kitchen counter. When she finished, her voice was hoarse and her eyes were red, and she looked at me for the first time since stepping out of the bathroom. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Officer Reynolds closed his notepad. He thanked my sister for her statement. He asked if she wanted to go to the hospital, and she shook her head so hard that her wet hair slapped against her swollen cheek. He asked if she wanted someone to stay with her tonight, and she pointed at me with a trembling finger. She'll stay. My mother's hands unclenched. My father blinked. I nodded because there was nothing else to do. Officer Reynolds left with my phone in a plastic bag and a promise to follow up in the morning. The front door clicked shut, and the house settled into a silence so thick I could taste it. My sister stood up and walked to the stairs without looking back. She paused at the bottom step and waited. I followed her up. Her room was the same as it had been when we were teenagers. Same lavender walls. Same white bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks. Same old desk with the chipped corner where she had thrown a hairbrush at me when I borrowed her sweater without asking. She sat on the edge of her bed and wrapped her arms around her knees. She looked small. She looked like she had shrunk. You recorded everything, she said. Yes. From the beginning. From the moment he came in. She pressed her palm against her cheek. The bruise was darker now, blooming into shades of purple and blue that would turn green by tomorrow morning. I had seen bruises like that before. I had seen them in case files and police reports and photographs submitted as evidence. I had never seen them on my sister's face. Why didn't you come out earlier? I sat down on the desk chair across from her. The wheels squeaked. They had always squeaked. When we were kids, she used to push me across the room in that chair, and we would crash into the bookshelf and laugh until our mother yelled up the stairs for us to quiet down. I needed to get it all, I said. If I came out too early, he would have stopped. He would have walked away. He would have claimed nothing happened. And then it would be your word against his, and he would have gotten away with it, and next time it would be someone else, and someone else after that. She stared at me. The fluorescent light from the hallway cut across her face and lit up the welt on her cheek. So you stood there. In the pantry. With your phone. I had to. You had to. Lily, I've been doing this for 4 years. I've seen cases fall apart because the victim waited too long to come forward. I've seen cases fall apart because the evidence was circumstantial. I've seen cases fall apart because the defendant had a good lawyer and the witness had a bad memory. I wanted to make sure that didn't happen to you. She dropped her hands from her knees and leaned forward. Her hair fell across her face, and she pushed it back with the same gesture she had used since she was 12. The same gesture. The same hand. The same girl, but something was different now. Something had shifted behind her eyes. You wanted to make sure I was credible, she said. Yes. That's what you were doing. Making me credible. Making sure no one could question my story. Lily, do you know what I thought? Standing in that kitchen, do you know what I thought when he had his hand around my throat and I couldn't breathe, and I saw the pantry door open just a crack, and I saw your phone pointed at me? I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. I thought, oh good, she's filming. She's filming my face. She's filming my eyes. She's filming the moment I die. And when they find my body, they'll have a nice clear video of exactly what happened, and everyone will say what a shame it was, and they'll put him away, and my sister will get her conviction. That's not what I was thinking. Then what were you thinking? I looked at the floor. The carpet was worn in a path from the door to the bed, the same path she had walked 1,000 times. I had walked that path too, when we were younger, and I would crawl into her bed after nightmares, and she would let me. She would always let me. I was thinking that if I opened that door too soon, he would run, I said. And then he would do it again to someone else. I was thinking that I needed to make sure he couldn't do it again. I was thinking that I would rather have you hate me for waiting than have you live with the guilt of knowing he got away and hurt someone else, because I was too quick to intervene. She was quiet for a long moment. The house creaked around us, settling into the night. Somewhere downstairs, my mother was probably crying into the kitchen sink. My father was probably standing in the garage with the door closed, staring at his workbench. They were both older than they had been this morning. We all were. You were right, she said finally. He would have run. He would have said it was consensual. He would have walked. I know that. I've watched the same news reports you have. I've read the same articles. I know what happens to women like me. You're not a woman like me. You're my sister. Then act like it. She lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling with the same water stain from the same leak that had been there since we were kids. The same house. The same family. But nothing was the same anymore. I'm not going to be your case study, she said. I'm not going to be your exhibit A. I'm not going to be the thing you show to jurors when you talk about how you got your start. I'm your sister, and I was afraid, and you watched me be afraid for 17 minutes before you did anything. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but nothing came out. She was right. She was absolutely right. 17 minutes was too long. 17 minutes was forever. 17 minutes was a lifetime of fear compressed into a span of time that would take me a lifetime to justify. I'm sorry, I said. She turned her head and looked at me. The bruise caught the light again, and I saw the shape of his hand printed on her skin. 4 fingers and a thumb. A handprint that would fade in a few weeks, but never really go away. Sorry doesn't fix it, she said. But it's a start. She reached out her hand. I took it. Her fingers were cold, colder than they should have been, and I held them the way I had held them when we were kids and she was scared of the dark. The same grip. The same pressure. The same girl, but different now. Different in a way I couldn't put into words. Mom is going to try to talk to you, she said. She's going to try to get you to drop it. To say it was a misunderstanding. To say David is sick. To say family comes first. I know. Don't listen to her. I won't. She squeezed my hand. Then she let go and turned her back to me and curled into herself on the bed. I sat in the squeaky chair and watched her breathe. Slow and even. The breathing of someone who had been through something terrible and was still trying to decide if she was going to be okay. Downstairs, the kitchen light clicked off. My mother's footsteps padded across the living room and up the stairs. They paused at Lily's door. I saw the shadow of her feet in the crack of light beneath the door. I waited for her to knock. She didn't. She walked to her own room and closed the door behind her. I stayed in Lily's room until the sun came up. I watched the sky go from black to gray to pale pink. I watched my sister sleep. And I thought about my phone in a plastic bag in Officer Reynolds' evidence locker, and the 47 minutes of truth, and the 17 minutes of silence that would haunt me for the rest of my life. When Lily woke up, she looked at me and smiled. It was a small smile. It didn't reach her eyes. But it was there, and I took it as a good sign. I took it as forgiveness. I was wrong. The morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of my mother's voice on the phone. I walked down the stairs and stopped at the landing where I could hear every word. She was talking to Aunt Helen. Of course she was. I know. But she recorded it. She had her phone out the whole time. I don't know what she was thinking. I told her to stay in the pantry. I told her to keep quiet. I didn't mean for her to film everything. A pause. My mother's voice dropped lower, but the walls were thin. They had always been thin. He's still in the hospital. They're keeping him for observation. The police haven't charged him yet, but they're talking about it. They're talking about assault. Maybe worse, depending on what that recording shows. Another pause. I heard the clink of a coffee mug being set down. Helen, I'm doing everything I can. I told the officer she was exaggerating. I told him she has a history of making things up. I told him she's been under a lot of stress with her job and she's not thinking clearly. He didn't seem convinced, but at least I planted the seed. That's all I can do right now. I stepped off the landing and walked into the kitchen. My mother spun around, her face flushed, her phone pressed tight against her ear. She ended the call without saying goodbye and set the phone face down on the counter. Good morning, she said. Her voice was bright, too bright, the voice she used when she wanted people to think everything was fine. Good morning, Mom. Your sister's still sleeping. I made coffee. There's eggs if you want them. I don't want eggs. She stood at the counter with her back to me, fussing with a dish towel. The kitchen looked different in the morning light. The same tiles, the same cabinets, the same refrigerator humming in the corner. But everything felt tilted, like a painting hung slightly off kilter. I talked to your aunt, she said. She's devastated. She can't stop crying. She called me at 6 in the morning because she couldn't sleep. She kept asking me what kind of daughter would do this to her family. To her family. To her cousin. To her aunt. To everyone who raised her and loved her and gave her a home when she needed one. I sat down at the kitchen table. The chair scraped against the linoleum, and the sound of it made me flinch. I had sat in this chair 1,000 times. I had eaten breakfast in this chair. I had done my homework in this chair. I had argued with my mother in this chair about curfews and grades and boyfriends. But I had never sat in this chair and felt like a stranger. Mom, I didn't do anything to Aunt Helen. David did something to Lily. I just recorded it. My mother turned around. The dish towel was twisted in her hands. Her knuckles were white. You don't understand what you've done. You've taken a complicated situation and turned it into a legal case. You've taken a family problem and turned it into a police matter. You've taken a troubled young man and turned him into a criminal. He is a criminal. He attacked Lily. He choked her. He threw her against a cabinet. He would have done worse if I hadn't stopped him. But you did stop him. You hit him with a pan. He's unconscious. He's in the hospital. He's already been punished. He's already suffered. Why do you need to keep going? I stared at her. She stared back. Her eyes were red-rimmed, not from tears but from lack of sleep. She had stayed awake all night too. I had seen her shadow beneath the door. I had heard her pacing. Because he needs to be held accountable, I said. Because if I let this slide, he'll do it again. Because Lily deserves justice. Because the law exists for a reason. The law exists to protect families. To keep them together. To help them heal. Not to tear them apart. He tore us apart when he put his hands on Lily. Not me. Not the recording. Him. My mother threw the dish towel on the counter. It landed in a crumpled heap, and she left it there. She walked to the table and sat down across from me. The same table where we had eaten Thanksgiving dinner. The same table where we had celebrated birthdays and graduations and Christmas mornings. The same table where she had told me I was going to law school even if I didn't want to go, because lawyers made good money and lawyers had secure futures and lawyers didn't end up like her. Stuck in a house with a husband who barely spoke and 2 daughters who barely listened. "Let me tell you something about family," she said. "Your grandfather had a brother. His name was Frank. Frank had a gambling problem. He lost everything. House, car, savings. He came to your grandfather for help, and your grandfather gave it to him. He gave him money. He gave him a place to stay. He gave him a second chance. And Frank repaid him by stealing from him. He took cash from his wallet. He took jewelry from his dresser. He took the silverware from the kitchen. I didn't know that. Because we don't talk about it. Because family handles things quietly. Your grandfather never pressed charges. He never called the police. He just took Frank aside and told him to leave and never come back. And Frank left. And he never came back. And the family survived. Survived. Exactly. We survived. We moved on. We didn't destroy Frank. We didn't ruin his life. We just let him go. Because that's what families do." I leaned back in my chair. The wood creaked beneath me, the same creak I had heard 1,000 times. The same chair, the same table, the same kitchen. But the words coming out of my mother's mouth were not the words I had heard growing up. Or maybe they were. Maybe I had just never listened closely enough. "Let me tell you something about the law," I said. "I've seen families who handled things quietly. I've seen what happens. The abuser moves on to someone else. The victim lives with the guilt of not speaking up. And the family tells themselves they survived. But they didn't survive. They just postponed the damage. They pushed it down. They pretended it didn't happen. And then it happened again, to someone else, somewhere else, and it was worse the second time because nobody learned anything." My mother was quiet. She looked at me with that flicker again. Calculating. Weighing. Deciding which story she was going to tell herself. "I don't want to lose my sister," she said. "Helen is the only sibling I have. She's been through so much. Her husband died young. Her son had problems. She's been fighting for him his whole life. And now you want to take him away from her." "I'm not taking him away from her. He did this to himself." "Listen to me," she said. She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tight, the same grip she had used in the hallway the night before. "If David goes to prison, Helen will never forgive me. She'll never forgive your father. She'll never forgive Lily. And she'll never, ever forgive you." I pulled my wrist back. Not roughly. Gently. Like I was untangling myself from a knot. "I can live with that," I said. "You can live with your aunt hating you for the rest of your life. I can live with knowing I did the right thing." My mother pushed back from the table. She stood up and walked to the window and stared out at the backyard. The grass was overgrown. The flowers she had planted in the spring were dead. She hadn't watered them in weeks. "You don't understand," she said. "You don't understand what you're asking me to do." "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you what I already did." She turned around and looked at me. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She was still wearing the cardigan I had bought her for Christmas. "The one with the missing button. Then we have nothing more to talk about," she said. She walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I heard her bedroom door close. I heard the lock click. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the dish towel on the counter, and I thought about Frank. I thought about the silverware and the jewelry and the cash. I thought about how my grandfather had let him go, and how Frank had probably gone on to steal from someone else, because people who steal don't stop stealing just because they got caught once. They just get better at hiding it. I had learned that in law school. It was the first thing they taught us. People don't change. They just find new ways to be the same. My father came down the stairs. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee. He didn't look at me. He didn't say anything. He just sat down at the table with his cup and stared at the wall. "Dad, I said. He didn't answer. Dad, what do you think? He took a sip of his coffee. Then another. Then he set the cup down and looked at me for the first time since I had come downstairs. I think, he said, that your mother has spent 40 years trying to hold this family together. And I think you just took a hammer to everything she built. He got up and walked out of the kitchen. He didn't look back. I sat alone at the table with the cold coffee and the dead flowers outside the window and the locked door upstairs. I thought about Lily in her room with her swollen cheek. I thought about Aunt Helen on the phone crying. I thought about David in the hospital, waiting to be charged. I thought about Officer Reynolds with his worn notepad and my phone in a plastic bag. And I thought about what my father had said. A hammer to everything she built. I wondered if I had done the right thing. I wondered if the right thing ever felt this wrong. Officer Reynolds called at 9 in the morning. He said the hospital had released David into police custody. He said the district attorney's office was reviewing the recording. He said he needed me to come down to the station and give a formal statement. I said I would be there in an hour. Lily was awake when I knocked on her door. She had already dressed. She had already brushed her hair, carefully, around the bruise on her cheek. She had already made a decision about what she was going to say. I drove us to the station in my car. The same car I had bought 2 years ago with my first big bonus. The same car my mother had called extravagant and my father had called unnecessary. The same car I had never let anyone else drive. Lily sat in the passenger seat and stared out the window at the houses passing by. The same houses we had driven past 1,000 times. But they looked different today. Everything looked different. You know what Mom is going to do, she said. She's going to tell them I'm lying. She's going to tell them I'm unstable. She's going to tell them I have a history of false accusations. She already told them that. Lily turned to look at me. Her eyes were swollen from crying. But her voice was steady. Stronger than I had expected. I know. She called Aunt Helen this morning. I heard her. She was already making excuses. She said I was dramatic when I was a kid. She said I always needed attention. She told Helen I made up stories about boys in high school. I remember that. You told Mom that Joey Matthews had followed you home. And he had. I saw him. I was walking behind you. He followed you for 3 blocks before you ran into the house. He said he was just going the same direction. Mom believed him. She said I was being too sensitive. She said boys will be boys. She told me to stop making a scene. I pulled into the police station parking lot. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, listening to the ticks of the cooling motor. She was trying to keep the peace, I said. She was trying to protect the family. Same thing. It's not the same thing. Keeping the peace means everyone is quiet. Protecting the family means everyone is safe. She chose the first one. We got out of the car and walked into the station. The air smelled like old coffee and floor wax and something metallic I couldn't identify. Officer Reynolds met us at the front desk. He looked tired. He had probably been up all night, reviewing the recording, writing reports, talking to the DA. Thank you for coming, he said. We've got a lot to go over. He led us to a small room with a table and 3 chairs. There was a camera in the corner. A microphone on the table. A tape recorder next to the microphone. He sat down across from us and opened a folder. Your sister's statement from last night was clear, he said, looking at Lily. She described everything that happened. She was consistent. She was credible. The recording supports every word she said. Lily nodded. She didn't look at me. She looked at Officer Reynolds, straight in the eyes, the way I had taught her to look at people when she wanted them to believe her. David is claiming something else, he continued. He's claiming that your sister invited him over. He's claiming they were involved in a relationship that was consensual. He's claiming that the recording is fabricated. He's claiming that you, Miss Canfield, edited the audio to remove parts where she was telling him to stay. I opened my mouth to respond, but Lily spoke first. He's lying. Officer Reynolds looked at her. I know he's lying. But he's got a lawyer now. His mother hired someone. A very expensive someone. And that someone is going to try to tear your statement apart. He's going to try to tear the recording apart. He's going to try to make you look like you're making this up. Lily didn't flinch. She sat up straighter in her chair. She folded her hands on the table the way I had seen her do 100 times when she was nervous, but trying not to show it. The same gesture. The same hands. The same girl, but she was different now. She was stronger. "I'm not making it up," she said. "And the recording isn't fabricated. My sister is a lawyer. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't risk her career." Officer Reynolds glanced at me. "Is that true, Ms. Canfield? You didn't edit the audio?" "Of course not. The recording is exactly what happened." He wrote something in his notepad. The same scratched paper, the same tight handwriting. He had been writing in that notepad for hours, probably, building a case that would either put David in prison or let him walk. "The DA is going to need you to testify," he said. "Both of you. The defense is going to cross-examine you. They're going to ask you about your relationship with your cousin. They're going to ask you why you waited 17 minutes. They're going to ask you about your relationship with your sister. They're going to try to paint you as a woman who was overzealous, who was looking for a case, who was more interested in building a file than protecting her own sister." I had expected this. I had prepared for this. I had spent 4 years preparing for this. But hearing it out loud, in that small room with the camera in the corner and my sister sitting beside me, it felt different. It felt personal. It felt like an attack. "Let them ask," I said. "I have the answers. Do you? Because the DA is also going to ask you why you didn't call for help. Why you didn't open the door. Why you didn't scream. Why you just stood there and watched." Lily's hand found mine under the table. She squeezed it once and let go. "Because she was building a case," she said. "Because she knew that without the recording, he would walk. Because she knew that my word wouldn't be enough. Because she knew that the system doesn't believe women like me." Officer Reynolds looked at her. His eyes softened. He was a good officer. I could tell. He had seen enough to know the truth when he heard it. "I believe you," he said. "And I think the DA will believe you. But I need to prepare you for what's coming. The defense is going to use your mother's statement. She told us last night that you have a history of exaggeration. That you've made false accusations before. That you were jealous of David because your aunt gave him more attention than you." I stared at him. "My mother said that. She gave a statement while you were upstairs with your sister. She said she didn't hear any screaming. She said the whole thing was exaggerated. She said you were overstating what happened because you wanted to punish David for something that happened years ago." Lily's hand tightened on the table. Her knuckles went white. "What happened years ago?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing. Nothing happened. She's just making things up. She's trying to protect Aunt Helen. She's trying to protect David. She's trying to protect herself." "I understand that," Officer Reynolds said. "But the defense is going to use it. They're going to put your mother on the stand. They're going to have her testify about your history. They're going to use her to discredit you." Lily looked at me. Her eyes were wet again. But she didn't cry. She held it together the way I had taught her. The way I had learned. The way we had both learned, because our mother had taught us that crying was a sign of weakness. "Let her testify," I said. "Let her say whatever she wants. I have the recording. I have the truth. And I have Lily." Officer Reynolds closed his notepad. He stood up and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. "One more thing," he said. "Your Aunt Helen is here. She wants to talk to you. Both of you. She's in the waiting room." I looked at Lily. She looked back at me. We had been preparing for the defense. We had been preparing for the DA. We had been preparing for the trial. But we had not been preparing for Aunt Helen. "Okay," I said. "We'll talk to her." Officer Reynolds opened the door. He led us down the hallway to the waiting room, and there she was. Aunt Helen. Sitting in a plastic chair with a cup of vending machine coffee in her hands. Her eyes were red. Her face was pale. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Fragile. She stood up when she saw us. She set the coffee down on the floor and walked over to Lily. She looked at the bruise on Lily's cheek, and her face crumpled. "Oh, honey," she said. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry he did this to you. I'm so sorry." She reached for Lily's hands. Lily pulled away. "Aunt Helen," she said, "you need to understand what happened." "I understand," Aunt Helen said. "I understand that my son is sick. I understand that he needs help. I understand that he did something terrible. And I'm asking you, both of you, to please, please, let him get that help. Don't destroy him. Don't take his life away. Let him get treatment. Let him get better. Please. She was crying now. The tears ran down her face in thick streaks. She looked at me with pleading eyes. You're a lawyer, she said. You know how the system works. You know what happens to people like him in prison. He won't survive. He'll be eaten alive. He'll be destroyed. And I'll lose my only son. I looked at Lily. She was staring at Aunt Helen with a face I couldn't read. Not anger. Not pity. Something in between. Lily, I said. What do you want to do? She stood there in the waiting room with the plastic chairs and the vending machine coffee and the sound of a police radio crackling in the distance. She looked at Aunt Helen. She looked at the bruise on her own cheek, reflected in the glass of a framed plaque on the wall. I want him to go to prison, she said. Aunt Helen stopped crying. Her face went blank. The tears were still wet on her cheeks, but the emotion was gone. I want him to go to prison, Lily repeated, and I want to be there when they take him away. The waiting room fell into a silence so complete that I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Aunt Helen stood frozen, her hands still extended toward Lily, her face a mask of shock that slowly hardened into something else. Something I had never seen on her before. Something that looked like recognition. You don't mean that, she said. You're upset. You're traumatized. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in my life, Lily said. I'm thinking about every time I kept quiet. Every time I let things slide. Every time I told myself it wasn't that bad. And I'm done. Aunt Helen turned to me. Her eyes were desperate, searching for an ally. You can't let her do this. You're the older one. You're supposed to protect her. Not let her throw her life away on revenge. I looked at my aunt. The same woman who had baked me cookies when I was 10. The same woman who had driven me to the hospital when I broke my arm at summer camp. The same woman who had held my hand at my grandfather's funeral and told me he was in a better place. She was the same woman. But she was also the mother of a man who had put his hands around my sister's throat. Lily isn't throwing her life away, I said. She's taking it back. Aunt Helen's face crumpled again. The tears came faster now, and she made no effort to wipe them away. She stood in the middle of the waiting room with her hands hanging limp at her sides, and she looked like a woman who had lost everything. He's my son, she whispered. My only son. My only child. His father is dead. I have no one else. No one. Do you understand what it's like to raise a child alone, to watch him struggle his whole life? To fight for him every single day, only to have him end up here, in a police station, with his own cousins wanting to put him in prison? I understood. I understood more than she knew. I had spent 4 years defending people like David. Not the violent ones mostly. The ones who had made mistakes. The ones who had gotten caught. The ones who had families who loved them and believed in them and would do anything to keep them out of prison. I had seen that love. I had seen that desperation. I had seen mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers sitting in courtrooms, crying, begging, bargaining with the universe for one more chance. But I had also seen the other side. I had seen the victims. I had seen the bruises. I had seen the fear. I had seen the way victims' lives unraveled while the perpetrators' families pleaded for mercy. And I had learned that mercy was a luxury. It was something you gave when you had enough. And right now, I had nothing left to give. Aunt Helen, I said, I know you love him. I know you've done everything you can for him. But love doesn't make him innocent. Love doesn't undo what he did. Love doesn't heal Lily's face or take away the fear she felt when he had his hand around her neck. You're a lawyer. You know how to make deals. You know how to negotiate. You could talk to the DA. You could get him a plea deal. You could get him into treatment instead of prison. He attacked my sister. He choked her. He threw her against a cabinet. He threatened her. That's not a treatment situation. That's a prison situation. Aunt Helen looked at Lily. Her eyes were wet and wide, the eyes of a woman who had run out of options. Lily, she said, please. Please. I'm begging you. I'm on my knees. Not for him. For me. For your mother. For this family. Don't do this to us. Don't tear us apart. Lily stepped forward. She stood close enough to Aunt Helen that she could have reached out and touched her shoulder. But she didn't. She stood with her arms at her sides, her chin lifted, her voice steady. You're asking me not to tear the family apart, she said. But you're not asking David to stop tearing people apart. You're not asking him to get help. You're not asking him to take responsibility. You're asking me to pretend it didn't happen. You're asking me to lie. You're asking me to be quiet. And I'm not going to be quiet anymore. Aunt Helen's hands trembled. Her whole body trembled. She looked at me, and I saw something shift in her face. The desperation was still there, but something else was rising underneath it. Something sharp. Your mother told me about you, she said. She told me how you used to make things up. How you used to exaggerate. How you used to turn small problems into big dramas. She told me you've been like that your whole life. Always needing attention. Always needing to be the center of something. And now you've dragged your sister into it. I felt the words hit me like a slap. I had heard them from my mother the night before. I had heard them from my father that morning. But hearing them from Aunt Helen in this room, with Lily standing beside me, it was different. It was like a door slamming shut. Mom told you that, I said. She told me because I needed to know. I needed to understand what kind of person I was dealing with. She said you've been jealous of David for years. Jealous of the attention he got. Jealous of the help he needed. Jealous of the way your mother and I always tried to take care of him. She said you wanted to punish him for something he didn't even do. Lily stepped forward again, her hand reaching for my arm. She squeezed it once and let go. Aunt Helen, she said, my sister didn't make this up. I was there. I felt his hands on me. I felt my head hit the cabinet. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. And she recorded it. She has the proof. You can't twist this into something it's not. Aunt Helen stared at her. For a long moment, nobody moved. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The police radio crackled in the distance. Somewhere in the station, a phone rang and no one answered it. I'm going to lose my son, Aunt Helen said. Her voice was quiet now. Flat. The emotion had drained out of it. I'm going to lose my son, and I'm going to lose my sister, and I'm going to lose my entire family. And it's all because of you. She looked at me when she said it. Not at Lily. At me. Because you couldn't just let it go. Because you had to record everything. Because you had to be the hero. Because you had to prove you were smarter than everyone else. I was trying to protect Lily. You were trying to protect yourself. You've been trying to protect yourself your whole life. Your mother told me. She told me everything. She told me about the boy you accused in high school. She told me about the teacher you lied about. She told me about all the times you played the victim. I felt something crack inside my chest. It was small at first, like a hairline fracture in a windshield. But it spread quickly, branching out in all directions, and I knew that if I didn't hold myself together, I would shatter right there in the waiting room. I was 12, I said. The boy was 14. He cornered me in the gymnasium closet. He put his hands on me. I told my mother, and she said I was being dramatic. She said I shouldn't have been in the closet with him. She said I was asking for it. Aunt Helen's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. That's what you're protecting, I continued. You're protecting a family that told a 12-year-old girl she was asking for it. You're protecting a system that blames victims for what happens to them. You're protecting a man who choked my sister. And you're calling it love. Lily's hand found mine again. This time she didn't let go. She held on tight, her fingers cold but steady, and I held on back. Aunt Helen turned away. She walked to the plastic chair and sat down heavily. She picked up the vending machine coffee from the floor and held it in her lap like a lifeline. She didn't drink it. She just held it. I don't know what else to say, she said. I don't know what else to do. I'm out of ideas. I'm out of hope. I'm out of everything. Lily released my hand and walked over to her. She knelt down in front of the chair and looked up at Aunt Helen with her bruised face and her steady eyes. You can tell the truth, she said. That's what you can do. You can tell the truth about what he did. You can stop protecting him. You can let him face the consequences. And then maybe, after all of that, you can start to heal. Aunt Helen looked down at her. The tears had stopped. Her face was dry and pale and lined with grief. I don't know how to do that, she whispered. I'll help you, Lily said. I'll be right here. We'll figure it out together. I watched them sit there in the plastic chairs, my aunt and my sister, two women on opposite sides of a chasm that had been widening for years. And for the first time, I thought maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe the chasm could be crossed. Maybe the family could survive. But it would take time. And it would take work. And it would take a truth that none of us had been willing to speak until now. The trial lasted 4 days. I sat in the gallery every single one of them, watching Lily take the stand, watching Aunt Helen sit in the front row with her hands folded in her lap, watching my mother and father enter the courtroom together and sit as far from me as they possibly could. Officer Reynolds testified first. He brought the recording. He played it for the jury. I watched their faces as Lily's voice filled the room, high and trembling, and then David's voice, low and casual, and then the thump of her body against the cabinet. The defense attorney tried everything. He tried to paint Lily as unstable. He tried to paint me as a zealot. He tried to paint David as a troubled young man who had made a terrible mistake and deserved compassion. He called my mother to the stand. She walked past me without looking at me. She sat in the witness box and smoothed her skirt and answered every question with the careful precision of a woman who had been practicing her story for weeks. She said Lily had a history of exaggeration. She said I had always been jealous of David. She said she didn't hear any screaming that night. She said the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. The prosecutor asked her if she loved her daughters. She said yes. The prosecutor asked her if she would lie to protect her nephew. She hesitated, just for a second. But the jury saw it. I saw it. And I knew that everything had changed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I spent those hours in the hallway outside the courtroom, sitting on a bench with Lily's hand in mine. Aunt Helen sat across from us. She didn't speak. She just stared at the wall, her eyes empty, her hands still folded in her lap. My mother and father sat at the other end of the hallway. They didn't speak either. The space between us felt like a canyon. When the jury came back, I held my breath. The foreman stood up and read the verdict. Guilty. On all counts. Assault. Battery. Attempted strangulation. The words echoed off the walls of the courtroom, and I heard Aunt Helen make a sound that I had never heard before. It was a sound of pure grief. It was the sound of a woman watching her only son disappear. David was led away in handcuffs. He looked back at his mother once, and I saw something pass between them. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Just recognition. The recognition of two people who had failed each other in ways that could never be repaired. Aunt Helen left the courtroom without speaking to anyone. She walked past my mother, past my father, past Lily and me, and she didn't look back. I watched her go, and I felt something heavy settle in my chest. She was alone now. Truly alone. And there was nothing I could do to fix that. The weeks that followed were strange. My mother stopped calling. She stopped showing up at family gatherings. She stopped pretending that everything was fine. My father kept his distance. He didn't come to the sentencing. He didn't call to ask how we were doing. He just disappeared into the silence of the house they had built together, a house that no longer felt like home. Lily moved into my apartment. She said she couldn't stay in that house anymore. She said she couldn't look at the kitchen counter where he had grabbed her. She said she couldn't hear the refrigerator hum without flinching. I understood. I understood more than she knew. We bought groceries together. We watched movies on the couch. We cooked meals that neither of us had the appetite to eat. We talked about everything except what had happened. The silence between us was comfortable, but it was also fragile. I knew that eventually we would have to break it. Eventually we would have to talk about the 17 minutes. It happened on a Tuesday night. Lily was sitting on the couch with a mug of tea in her hands, and I was folding laundry on the floor. The television was on, but neither of us was watching it. The sound of some sitcom laughter filled the room, and then Lily muted it. Can I ask you something? She said. I looked up. Of course. She set the tea down on the coffee table. She was wearing one of my old sweaters, the same one she had borrowed 100 times. She looked younger in it. Softer. But her eyes were older now. They had seen things. Why didn't you tell anyone about the boy in the gymnasium closet? I folded a shirt and set it aside. I had been waiting for this question. I had been waiting for it since the day Aunt Helen had mentioned it in the police station. I had been waiting for it for years. I tried to tell Mom, I said. She didn't believe me. Did you try to tell anyone else? No. I was 12. I didn't know how. I just thought it was normal. I thought that's what happened to girls. I thought I was supposed to keep quiet. She looked at me with something in her eyes that I had never seen before. Something like pity, but deeper. Something like grief. Mom told me you were lying. She told me you were making it up. She told me you just wanted attention. I know what she told you. That's why I didn't say anything else. Lily picked up her tea again. She held it in her hands and stared at the steam rising off the surface. The silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. I don't want to be like her, she said. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to keep secrets. I don't want to protect people who don't deserve to be protected. Then don't. I'm not. That's why I'm asking you. Because I want to know who you are. Not who Mom says you are. Not who Dad says you are. Not who the trial made you out to be. I want to know the real you. I set the laundry aside. I walked over to the couch and sat down next to her. I took her hand in mine, the same hand I had held in the police station, the same hand I had held when we were kids, and she was scared of the dark. I don't know who the real me is, I said. I've spent so long being a lawyer, building cases, gathering evidence, protecting other people, that I forgot to protect myself. I forgot to be a sister. I forgot to be a daughter. I forgot to be anything other than the person who records everything. She squeezed my hand. You recorded me. I did. You saved me. I did. And you didn't come out for 17 minutes. I didn't. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She had done enough crying. We both had. I've been so angry, she said. I've been so angry at you for waiting. I've been so angry at myself for not fighting harder. I've been so angry at Mom for lying and Dad for being silent and Aunt Helen for choosing him over me. And I don't want to be angry anymore. I'm tired of being angry. I put my arm around her. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder, the same way she had done when we were kids. The same gesture. The same girl. But different now. We were both different now. Anger is a part of it, I said. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. That's not weakness. That's healing. She laughed. It was a small laugh, barely more than a breath, but it was real. It was the first real laugh I had heard from her in months. When did you get so wise? She said. I went to law school. That's not where you get wisdom. That's where you learn how to argue. Same thing. She laughed again. It was bigger this time, fuller, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Something that had been wound tight for weeks. Something that had been wound tight for years. I want to go back to the house, she said. Not to stay. Just to see it. Just to see them. Just to close the door on that part of my life. I nodded. We can go tomorrow. I want you to come with me. I will. She pulled away and looked at me. Her face was calm. It was the face of someone who had made peace with something terrible, not by forgetting it, but by accepting that it had happened. Thank you, she said. For everything. For the recording. For the 17 minutes. For the trial. For being here. For being my sister. I looked at her. My sister. The girl who had shared a room with me for 15 years. The girl who had borrowed my clothes and stolen my snacks and cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke her heart. The girl who had been attacked in a kitchen while I stood in a pantry with a phone. The girl who had forgiven me for something I could never forgive myself for. We're going to be okay, I said. It's going to take a long time. But we're going to be okay. She nodded. She picked up her tea and unmuted the television. The sitcom laughter filled the room again, and we sat there on the couch, two sisters who had been through something terrible and come out on the other side. The next morning, we drove to the house. My mother was in the kitchen when we walked through the back door. She was standing at the counter with a coffee cup in her hand, staring out the window at the dead flowers. She turned when she heard us, and for a moment, she looked like the mother I remembered. The mother who had made me breakfast before school. The mother who had kissed my forehead when I had nightmares. The mother who had raised me to be strong and independent and honest. But that mother was gone. She had been gone for a long time. I just hadn't been ready to see it. We came to say goodbye, Lily said. Not forever. Just for now. My mother set down her coffee cup. She looked at Lily's face, the bruise long healed, the memory still there. She looked at me, standing in the doorway of the kitchen where everything had happened. I'm sorry, she said. The words were small. They were barely a whisper. But they were there. I nodded. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. But I acknowledged the words. I let them sit in the air between us. We're going to be okay, Lily said. All of us. Eventually. My mother nodded. She didn't cry. She didn't reach out. She just stood at the counter with her coffee cup and watched us leave. We walked out the back door and got in my car. I drove us away from the house, away from the kitchen, away from the memories. Lily sat in the passenger seat with the window rolled down, her hair blowing in the wind. Where are we going? She asked. I don't know, I said. Anywhere. Everywhere. Somewhere new. She smiled. It was a real smile. It reached her eyes. Then let's go, she said. I drove. We didn't look back.